Welcome to our channel. Today we'll be exploring the fascinating philosophical debate between two giants of 20th century philosophy, Willard van Orman Quine and Peter Strawson. We'll dive into their contrasting views on language, meaning, and reference. If you've ever wondered how philosophers understand what words mean and how we use language to refer to things in the world, then this video is for you. Let's get started. To understand the debate between Quine and Strawson, we first need to frame the question: how do words mean what they mean, and how do they refer to things in the world? This is an age-old philosophical problem. On one side we have Quine, a philosopher deeply skeptical of traditional concepts of meaning and reference. On the other side we have Strawson, who focuses on how our use of language reveals fundamental categories of thought and the structure of reality itself. Let's break down their views step by step, starting with Quine. Quine's most famous critique is against something called the analytic-synthetic distinction. This distinction was central to the philosophy of logical positivists like Rudolf Carnap. According to this view, analytic statements are those that are true by virtue of the meanings of their words alone, like the statement "all bachelors are unmarried." You don't need to go out into the world to check if it's true simply because of the meanings of the words. On the other hand, synthetic statements are those that depend on facts about the world. For example, "the cat is on the mat" is a synthetic statement because its truth depends on the actual state of the world. Quine's groundbreaking argument, especially in his essay Two Dogmas of Empiricism, was that this distinction between analytic and synthetic truths doesn't hold up. He argued that all statements are connected to our experience of the world in a web of belief. No statement, not even logical or mathematical truths, is entirely immune to revision. For Quine, what we think of as meaning is deeply tied to the entire system of language and knowledge, not just isolated sentences. This leads Quine to another bold move: his skepticism about the traditional concept of meaning itself. He famously challenged the idea that we can ever clearly say what the meaning of a word or sentence is in isolation. Instead, he argued, meanings are indeterminate. His famous example of the word gavagai illustrates this. Imagine a native speaker points at a rabbit and says gavagai. Does this mean rabbit, or does it mean undetached rabbit part, furry creature, or something else? According to Quine, there's no fact of the matter that determines which one is right. The meaning of the word is dependent on the broader context of the language system and our experiences. In this sense, meaning is always connected to the whole structure of knowledge and belief. Now, let's turn to Peter Strawson. While Quine was deeply skeptical about the concept of meaning, Strawson took a very different approach. He believed that language is not just about reference or empirical verification, it's also a window into how we structure our thoughts in the world. Strawson argued that by examining how we use language, we can uncover the basic conceptual categories that shape our understanding of reality. For Strawson, communication is not just about conveying information, it's about revealing the basic framework within which we organize our experiences. For example, he argued that the way we refer to people, objects, or events reflects fundamental structures in our thinking. Our language carries with it implicit assumptions about identity, existence, and relationships. Strawson's approach is part of what he calls descriptive metaphysics. This means he isn't trying to propose a new theory about what the world is like that would be revisionary metaphysics instead. He's trying to describe how we already think and talk about the world. In this sense, Strawson is interested in how language reflects our shared conceptual framework. In contrast to Quine, who questioned whether we can ever really pin down meaning, Strawson thought that studying language carefully can reveal our most basic ways of understanding the world. To better understand the contrast between Quine and Strawson, let's adjust our analogy slightly. Imagine two people speaking different languages. One person is trying to say the dog is in the garden, while the other speaks a completely different language and uses different categories to structure reality. For Quine, the problem wouldn't just be about finding the right translation. He would argue that the very meanings of the words dog, garden, in are indeterminate. The meanings of words are never fixed or absolute, they depend on the entire web of beliefs within the language system. Any attempt at translation or communication involves uncertainty, because there is no single fact of the matter that determines what these words mean across languages. In contrast, Strawson would see the breakdown in communication as an indication of different conceptual categories being used by each speaker. However, his primary concern isn't with the communication problem itself. Rather, Strawson is more interested in how shared use of language within a common framework allows people to successfully communicate most of the time. He would argue that language reflects the basic ways we categorize reality, and these categories, such as person, object, and event, are fundamental to understanding our world. The analogy shows that when these shared categories are lacking, communication breaks down, but this is secondary to his main point. Language usually works because it reflects these underlying structures. Let's also think about how these views play out in different contexts, like in daily conversations versus scientific discourse. In everyday conversation, we often rely on shared background knowledge to understand each other. When I say it's raining outside, you don't need a precise definition of each word to understand me. We share a common framework for interpreting the world. This is closer to Strawson's idea, language works, because we all operate within a shared conceptual structure. But when it comes to scientific discourse, Quine's skepticism becomes more relevant. In science, every term needs to be defined clearly, and our understanding of these terms can shift as our knowledge grows. Quine would argue that even in science, no term is immune to revision. Our concepts of atom or energy, for example, have changed dramatically over time as our scientific understanding has evolved. For Quine, this highlights how even seemingly precise terms are part of the broader web of belief and subject to change. In summary, Quine and Strawson offer two very different perspectives on language, meaning, and reference. Quine is deeply skeptical about the very idea of fixed meanings and argues that all knowledge, including meaning, is part of a holistic, interconnected system that is always subject to revision. Strawson, on the other hand, believes that by studying language we can uncover the basic categories of thought that shape our understanding of reality. Both philosophers challenge traditional views of language and meaning in profound ways, but they approach the problem from opposite directions. Quine emphasizes the indeterminacy and fluidity of meaning, while Strawson sees language as a stable reflection of our conceptual structure. And that brings us to the end of today's video. I hope this helped clarify the contrasting views of Quine and Strawson on language, meaning, and reference. If you have any questions or thoughts, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more philosophy content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.